proplaygames 1K Lorcana event. We are excited to get started here, and the players have already begun mulligan. I also have Free with me today.
Hey everybody, how are you? Very excited to be here for the Lorcana 1K here at proplaygames. It's an in-store event. There look to be a bunch of players playing today, like a sea of Lorcana Illumineers out there, so it's going to be very exciting to see what decks are, popular right now.
Yeah.
In this particular match, we actually have uh, Ruby Amethyst going up against Sapphire Steel, and the players are shuffling up one last time post mulligans to go ahead and get round one feature match started. And yeah, this is very exciting. This is actually the first Lorcana, like I guess major, if you want to call it that, that I will be personally looking at each round. And I want to see how the metagame has developed, moving from just Dreamborn onto actual IRL scene. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be the big thing here is how are players translating their pixel board games, into these paper events, and this 1K is like a great setting to do that in. I mean, we saw the NDK tournament from Pro Play Games like a few weeks back, and here we are, players excited to play in the shop. So, did you get to watch that event at all?
No, so like I said, this is some of the first footage outside of YouTube for Lorcana that I'm pretty much witnessing, and it's really cool to see it IRL in particular. So that's exciting. And we see a very very cool. So the Sapphire Steel deck is actually a hyper ramp deck. It's one of my favorite strategies. You essentially, get upwards of 10, 15 ink, and then you start doing like massive wombo combo plays. So a lot of cool stuff coming from that side. From the side of the red purple player, he's actually playing the one drop Maleficent, which is not very common in those lists, but it could be very instrumental in this matchup because the blue steel deck is not known to be very fast. So a very good opener right now.
Yeah, and that's going to take them up to two lore there.
So he goes up to two ink on his side and then passes back to, and this Maleficent is actually going to be used more than once this game, which is very, very powerful. And then we see Maleficent joined by another Maleficent in the three drop. Very popular card, probably the most popular purple card if I had to just guess. Being
It's
able to draw an extra card, replace itself, and also quest for one. So a lot of questing out of the red purple player in the early game, and I really like to see that against this sort of very slow, very methodical ramp strategy on the other side. So awesome to see this type of aggression coming from what's normally known as a very controlly deck is actually all swings on the first few turns. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to see the one cost Maleficent come down. I mean, that's that's not a card that we're going to see very often, and I'm happy to see players exploring more of the aggressive side of that color.
Yeah, definitely. So everybody knows Lilo to be a very powerful card, and this is just Lilo, pound for pound in the purple color. So complemented with that purple card draw is actually,
Fishbone Quill.
showing good amount of questing power here. And then we get to see actually Fishbone's a card that has been preferred by the sort of ramp strategies over something like a Mickey in the three drop slot. And it's actually incredibly powerful as it gets to ink cards that are normally not able to be inked. So very cool to see Fishbones come down on three here. He actually preferred to play Fishbones and ramp over, do something like remove the Maleficent. So I wonder if he's gonna get out tempoed here by this red purple opening, and we get to see just a little bit more drawing cards over here, more questers coming down, and then questing for three. So 2-7, and how is the blue steel player going to deal with this sort of onslaught? I get to see if grab your swords is the best answer here, and I wonder if he has it available to him right now. It looks like he does, and we're gonna get to see when exactly does he develop the grab your swords. I would hope it's this turn, as he's facing down quite a lot of questing power from the other side. So I He's right now. He's debating the blue steel player, debating on how he's going to sequence out this turn. He is under a lot of pressure, but at the same time, he does seem to have the tools to be able to deal the sort of early game onslaught. And then also probably debating. Okay, so there we go. So grab your swords, definitely probably the last turn that he would have been able to play grab your swords, and identifying that it was really good to board wipe at this point in time. Does he actually want to continue playing ink down? And I think he does, because the more that he inks now, the more value that he gets out of a whole new world later on. So going to be able to curve out this board wipe effect into fish boning on the next turn into something like a whole new world. So quite timely. Grab your swords there. And these two 5-drop steel songs definitely premier cards in the set one metagame. So to see them splashed in multiple different strategies. To see now another smash picked up. Maybe he'll use that to deal with the Maleficent before singing the draw 7 card. And does he actually want to reset the opponent's hand too? It does feel like with 3 cards in hand, he has the red purple player probably has not ran out of fuel, so it doesn't seem outside the realm of possibility to reset his hand with the whole new world. But gonna get to see how the blue steel player wants to sequence his turn. So far, so good. He fell a little bit behind early on, but seems to be right on the verge of turning the corner. You know, this turn being very pivotal in how he wants to mold the rest of this game. And so he goes ahead and inks a Maleficent. 5-drop, the card very good as it has 3 quests, but for right now, it's gonna put face down just to get a few more resources to work with. I do want to see something like the Smash plus the Tinkerbell, just taking control of the battlefield while at the same time getting rid of this 2 questing power threat from the other side. But also fish bones away the Tinkerbell. That's another consideration as well. So the most powerful part about Fishbone in particular is actually that the card gets inked standing, so it can be used on that very same turn. And he does. He uses 3 ink to get rid of the Maleficent, and the 5 ink, thanks to that fish bones, in order to draw 7 cards and reset the opponent's hand. And we see a lot of power cards being discarded from the Amber Amethyst deck, or Ruby Amethyst actually. And nice hand reset on both sides. So let's see how the Ruby Amethyst deck can actually bounce back from getting that hand reset. He has a lot of tools at his disposal now, good amount of ink, and he's going to have to navigate this sort of reset game state. He's doing pretty well in the early game, and he's definitely not out of it as he is 7 lore to 0. Could do something like a no value Aladdin. Again, Aladdin, incredibly powerful when it gets to reduce the opponent's lore by 1, but at the same time, also just good as an Aladdin body in order to be able to shift into that larger Aladdin. We do see one of those snuck in his hand right there, so definitely a powerful combo card later on. And he just hardcast his friends from the other side. A card that's probably alongside Maleficent, you know, I would say the 1-2 punch, the 2 most used cards in purple. Definitely just a very versatile cards, but I would say that at this point, the Sapphire Steel player is in incredibly good control of this game, and if he can, you know, keep removing the threats from the other side of the table while at the same time just inking up to a more comfortable number like 11 or 12. That sounds like a incredibly large number for this strategy. It is very ink dependent, so around that number is when things start getting out of hand for the opponents. I love to see this sort of like outside the box ramp strategy from the Sapphire Steel decks, and typically, sometimes they get out tempoed in the early game, but we saw that grab your swords being able to stabilize the game. So debating his options, every turn with this deck is sort of difficult to navigate in the sense that the game can get out of hand at any moment. So he has to look forward to dealing with certain threats in advance. What happens if the opponent plays a Maleficent or a Mickey 8 drop, for example, and just calculating all those different options that the opponent can have. A very meticulous deck to play, and so that's why he's taking his time there. We see developing a little bit of the board. Again, these steel threat choices in the Prince and the Tinkerbell, not exactly great questers as they only quest for one, but they have alternative effects. The Tinkerbell in particular being able to cycle through dead cards in the hand. So they give up a little bit of that questing power for additional effects. And Eric obviously very powerful at attacking down multiple different threats, notably the Simba in the amber color. Here we'll get to see how much value he actually gets, but all in all, a pretty decent turn. Just being in complete control. He is definitely looking for something like another whole new world to solidify his lead in the game. Let's see what the response is from the Ruby player on our right side. Up 3 down, definitely wants to develop something. 3 drops like, okay, another Maleficent, just trying to see as many options as possible. And the Ruby player does want to solidify some sort of a larger threat moving into these 7 ink, 8 ink, 9 ink turns. But for right now, he's only found smaller character cards. So not really playing that many haymakers, but now the mirror coming down, that's going to be incredibly powerful in these sort of drawn out games, drawing multiple cards over the course of the game. Obviously using 4 ink to draw a card with that. So very timely that he found one of those on this turn. Was able to develop it. Develop also 2 extra questers as well. So pound for pound, pretty decent turn on both sides. And we're gonna go back to our ramp player on the left. We do see the item crab. I'm going to pull up the name of that card. Not typically used in many different strategies, but definitely in this one you have the ink in order to be able to play around with a card. Incredibly powerful card. It buys back a item from the discard pile when played, and as well as quests +1 for the number of items that you have in play. The fishbone quill and the mirror are going to count towards this. So there you go. It's been played right now. Actually going to use the official Lorcana app in order to find the name of
Tamatoa.
our little 8-drop friend over there. So with me one moment. So his name is actually Tamatoa, and it's actually a hilarious name now that I see it. And Tamatoa, like I mentioned, 8-drop inkable, so very versatile in the early game, and then once it's on the field, is an 5/8, so incredibly powerful, difficult to get rid of threat that energizes with all these items that the blue steel player is playing. So incredibly powerful Haymaker, and the first Haymaker played by the blue steel player, which is surprising as normally the Haymaker color is this red purple colors combination. So we're gonna have to see if something like a Mickey comes on this turn. I don't see it available, and he also doesn't have the reduction for the Aladdin. And so without being able to rush into something, the Aladdin doesn't have that much value in the face of this crab. So it's difficult options in general for the what you would perceive to be the control player over here, but um, to see how he wants to navigate here. Something like getting rid of this Tinkerbell does seem important because that can get shifted onto with the larger Tinkerbell and that can control the board really well. So see if he wants. He can also shift Torture's Hardcast, so he has the option. Okay, so the Doctor comes down, and it's actually an interesting choice to shift it versus just hard casting it. I wonder what he's going to utilize the last two ink for. Could be reasonable if he had 4 ink left in order to draw an extra card. Maybe he wants to get some sort of extra value with another 3 drop, perhaps. See what it does with that. But an incredibly powerful 7 drop now. Haymakers on both sides. Every time that a card is removed from the table, a character card is removed from the table, it gets added back to his hand, and also a quest for 3. So definitely really good to have that. Oh, and then now we see why he went ahead and did the shift, because he gets to play another Aladdin in order to reduce the Aladdin on a future turn that's in his hand. So that's very reasonable there. And now he gets to go to 11 lore. So answering the Haymaker battle quite well with the red purple players. So good on both sides so far. And I got to see, because it's not very easy to deal with this Fusile threat, and being a 4/5, he's gonna have to use his crab not to quest but to remove it if he wants to, maintain the field. Alternatively, he can crash both of his smaller characters into it, but doesn't seem too efficient. So, oh, he actually has, like we mentioned before, the perfect out in the Tinkerbell. So the Tinkerbell is gonna come down, chip damage the entire right side of the field, and at the same time be able to deal with presumably Aladdin and the Facility at the same time. So very powerful, and the interaction is gonna be quite good if he does decide to go for that play. I would suggest he does, as it's going to deal 2 damage to the character from the Tinkerbell, removing character from play effect after the facility is actually destroyed. So the Aladdin's not going to go back to the hand. So very good sequence for the blue steel player overall, and then getting rid of the last quester on the table. So definitely a great way to deal with the board. And now his Tamatoa can start questing for additional amounts with this mirror. So seeming like he's in complete control of the game from now, because he has 2 removal, upwards of 3 removal with Hades and the 2 Let It Goes in hand, and now he has upwards of 5 questing power on his side. So the Sapphire Steel player was in a commanding position. You could definitely tell that it was a turning point when he did the first grab your swords of the game and then drew 7. So, and then now he's been able to capitalize on the advantage that he gained in the early game. A little bit, now that we go back to playing, based on the hand that the red purple player got, he had to play into that grab your swords in order to try to out tempo the blue steel deck. And if that grab your swords wasn't there, it would have been GG, but it was. And now facing down 5 questing power, but he gets to use a removal spell. Okay, so removal spell on Tamatoa. That Dragon Breath, definitely a good answer to this 2 questing power, but still Tinkerbell and the Prince left on the other side. So a little bit at a time, comeback is mounting from blue steel side. So we do see another top deck Fishbones. That most likely will be used as ink, because he does not need it. He could play it in thinking ahead in an eventuality that another Tamatoa comes down to give Tamatoa additional questing power, as he really doesn't need that much ink anymore. He does want to get cards out of his hand, because he does want to be able to activate these Beast Mirror that he has in play. So does ink a very good card in Let It Go, but again, he does want to get access to 0 cards in hand so that he can use the mirror effect. So understandable he does it. He might even Fishbones another card away. Also debating whether he wants to play this Hades for no value, as it is able to quest for 2. I mean, he doesn't want to play into the 7-drop board wipe effect from the side of the red purple player, so that's understandable to keep Hades in his hand. But how it's a good decision point from the side of the blue steel player. How much does he commit to the field in order to try to close out the game versus how much time does he want to give the red purple player to start developing those threats? Here's Cauldron, so very interesting card. Not a card that gives you direct card advantage in the sense that it draws you extra cards, but it does combine with your mirror effects in order to give you very high card quality, as you can choose what cards you get at all times. So an incredibly powerful card in combination with other draw effects. Definitely the purple color, the highest card advantage in the game. Alongside, I would say steel with that whole new world. So very good Cauldron Mirror combo on the other side. And if given enough time, like I mentioned before, the purple red player will draw out of this situation. So how much time really does the blue steel player want to give him? I just feel like I mentioned before with those removal spells in hand, he does have a lot of time, but never want to not close out the game as fast as possible, right? So comes Aladdin. So like we mentioned before, Aladdin without any sort of rush ability, not as powerful as it could be, but he does play it, and it is the largest threat in play at the moment with a 5/5 stat line. So that Tinkerbell and that Prince no longer able to quest, at least for right now, and then demanding an answer does Aladdin, but answers for days has the ramp player. Here comes Hades. This is particularly one of my favorite cards in the entire game. Hades being able to ink a particular card on the opponent's side of the table and at the same time having 2 questing power. So incredibly powerful card all around. We're going to get to see another fishbone item, and this fishbone item in combination with the beast mirror, very powerful, as you get to lure up to 3 cards per turn while at the same time drawing extra cards. So how does the red purple player, which is perceived to be, like we mentioned before, the stronger of the 2 late game decks, but at the same time, this ramp deck, I mean, just has access to more ink, has a great amount of both wide removal as well as tall removal in the form of Hades and Tinkerbell, right? So definitely going toe to toe with this perceived best deck in the format in the red purple deck, and it seems like it has a good matchup at that. We saw it not lose in the early game, so now it's in a commanding position, and might be a good meta call at the same time. Playing something like blue steel, I mean, it might be worse against the aggro decks of the world, you know, anything with green, but if you're going to play against control players all day, then it might be the right choice. Hades in particular being incredibly powerful in basically every matchup, so we do see a lot of draw power coming through. What does he do now? He only has 3 ink left facing down this board, so just getting a little bit out-tempoed on this turn. Deciding, gonna go ahead and lay the shield for 1. Shield, very powerful in combination with something like Aladdin, and then another mirror. So deciding just to take a little bit of a slower approach. I do believe his mentality is essentially he's going to give himself the highest possible chances of drawing a Be Prepared over the course of the next few turns, and you know, just taking the approach that okay, the 5 questing power on the other side of the table is not going to defeat me on this turn. And more or less from what's happened the last couple of turns, you can see that the blue steel player, until he gets to start drawing cards, is relatively out of fuel, or at least out of proactive options. So he's telling himself, okay, I'm going to give myself the highest odds of drawing Be Prepared as soon as next turn. He still has 4 copies left in the deck, maybe 1 discarded earlier in the game from Whole New World, but at upwards of 3 copies of the border wipe effect if he maxes out on that card, which I would suspect he does. And basically saying, okay, grab your swords was your last hurrah earlier in the game. I'm going to rely on my board wipe as well. And I like the strategy. I like the fact that the blue steel player has actually recognized that there is no Wrath effect available, cutting off another mirror with the beast effect, and then say, okay, I'm going to put a 2-turn clock in the game. It's going to be 5 this turn and then lethal on the next turn. So telling him better habit, and both players on the same page that this board wipe is the only way that red purple can come back in the game. And it do think I got a sneak peek at what he top decked, but this Cauldron, does he see it in the top 2 cards? I don't quite think so. Let's see if he can actually get there. Does he have enough to draw an extra card and then also play? Be prepared. So contemplating his options, staring down at 7 questing power, definitely lethal on the way back, and something like an Elsa too wouldn't be too terrible in this board. It would mean that basically every card for the rest of the game was for lethal, but at the same time might be one of the only options left. Contemplating, seeing what he can do. So something like an Elsa, let's see the ramifications of it. It would be 3 questing power left over the other side of the table, and you would still be in the predicament where you have to top deck a Be Prepared, but at the same time, keeping yourself in the game is the red purple player if he goes ahead and plays Elsa. So definitely something he wants to do. Not giving up, putting up a good fight. Want to top down the Beast, presumably, as it is the only untapped card that has 2 questing power, and then targeted the Tinkerbell as well. Tinkerbell obviously damaged already, so if something like Rafiki is available, it could be removed later on, so a good target for that card. Then saying Hades is not untapping on the way back, so that is okay. Hades put up great work before, so tapping it down with also seems very reasonable, so went ahead and passing the turn, and we caught a glimpse of his hand earlier. He does not have that Wrath effect, and I don't believe he saw it on the top of the deck, but he does get another turn after this one. This won't be the last turn of the game, so I do believe something like solidifying another Beast Mirror and then just saying I'm going to ink pretty much everything for the rest of the game. There we go. Let it go. Let's go as Elsa. So that's a flavor win in my book. It's a pretty funny moment. Defeated by her own song was Elsa, but aside from that, using Fishbones in order to ink an uninkable card, incredibly powerful Fishbone, and then, like we mentioned before, playing the second Beast Mirror. So now he can go ahead and ink up to 3 cards per turn, and at the same time draw 2 extra cards. So for the rest of the game, he's playing on 0 cards in hand or Hellbent as another turn for it, and going ahead and questing for 3 like we mentioned before. Even if this entire field is Be Prepared away, don't think that it's enough preparation in order to try to fight back in this situation, as there's just too much fuel from the side of the ramp, and he well and truly has established his entire setup. So I believe there's a question on when exactly can he activate his card for the turn. He has to definitely draw a card for the turn first and then use his Cauldron ability in order to see the top 2 cards. So proper sequencing. And there we see the Be Prepared on the top. Can he actually? He has 3. So he has enough to draw an extra card and actually play it. And I think we're going to get to see a full board reset this turn. Does he have enough? Is it the card that was on top of the deck? I think it was. I just caught a brief glimpse of it, but there it is. Oh my god. On the last possible draw that he had in order to find a Be Prepared, he does actually find it. And that's quite stellar, giving himself the maximum amount of options in order to be able to draw that, preparing himself, putting a second mirror in play, anticipating that something like a beast was going to destroy the first one, and very great play. And now both boards are at parity at nothing but, again, 2 fish bones and 2 mirrors. So as long as he gets to play every card in his hand this turn, which he can go ahead and ink, fire the cannons with no target, still can get ink because of that fishbone, so incredibly powerful effect. And now the extra card draw is starting. So in this particular scenario, one deck has draw an extra card per turn for 3 as opposed to 4 from the side of the purple mirror. So this mirror showing a little bit of tempo advantage, but that was an awesome be prepared. Just staying in the game. Now Ursula actually taking down a lore from the opponent in order to draw an extra card. Ursula actually potentially my favorite card if there's ever something like a multiplayer format. Just an incredibly powerful effect, for the future of the game. And as of right now, a very powerful effect in this game in particular as well. So it goes ahead and takes away a little bit of lore. Make sure. Oh, and another take away one lore from the Aladdin. So again, just very good stabilizing top decks from the side of the red purple player. He's fighting the good fight. Finding another cauldron, not super ideal, but again, those cauldrons not costing any lore in order to see the top of the deck. So incredibly efficient cards all around. Smaller Elsas being inked in order to give themselves another cauldron. And now definitely he's going to stack essentially any card that he needs at the top of the deck as long as he sees it. So he is well and truly established. Both players are. Can the blue steel player finish the game before, again, the red purple player just having so much late game haymakers and threats and outs and just healing with these lore stealing cards? And so we do see a draw 7, and does he actually want to use that or put it down as ink with one of the fish bones? It's actually going to be an incredibly difficult choice. Only 2 cards on the 3 cards in the opponent's hand too. But what exactly does he lean on these beast mirrors instead of his whole new world? He is opting to ink whole new world and draw 3 with his mirrors, and I do agree with this. Giving a full grip of cards to the red purple player at this point in the game does not seem wise. So I do agree with this choice. Draws a 1-drop, very good draw in this case, as he has another redraw. Then picking up a smash to presumably play on the Aladdin. Now, not very good removal in the face of this Ursula. Something like a Hades is requisite in order to deal with that. But for the most part, now just racing to the finish line. Essentially, every 2 questing power card for the rest of the game is lethal at this point in time, and you're drawing 3 cards a turn. So sitting pretty is the Sapphire Steel player. Never count this Ruby Amethyst deck out of the game. It has shown for the last few turns of this game that it's definitely got the chops to deal with this late game scenarios. And how does it navigate having to deal with essentially every card played for the rest of the game? And going ahead and I do believe he's going to go questing for 3. Then after he quests for 3, he's going to try to use this shield in order to sing the Be Prepared, and that would be an incredible tempo play. Oh, but he doesn't actually opt for that. Okay, so he goes ahead and opts to hardcast it, decides to leave the shield up for a different option later on. And then maybe he didn't have anything to play alongside, leaving that 7 ink open, so he just decided to hardcast it. Either way is looking at the top 2 cards of the deck, as we mentioned before, 2 cauldrons in order to sculpt the perfect draw every turn. But can the perfect draw match 3 whole draws from the side of the blue steel player? In a top deck where I'd rather draw 3 than 1, even if I got to essentially stack the cards perfectly. So let's see. Oh, 3 questing power, exactly. So something now that Steel's lore is not actually going to be enough to stop this Maleficent. This Maleficent being a 5-drop 3 quest, incredibly powerful option for these sort of top deck wars. And again, just being able to go down to 0 cards in hand every single time with these fish bones, great in combination with these beast mirrors. So who is going to win this top deck war? I mean, right now, the red purple player being put on checkmate for the last couple of turns in a row has been able to deal with those checkmate situations, and he gets the Dragon Breath. So now he's going to have an answer to this 3 quest power card the Maleficent on the other side, and at the same time, this is going to be the first turn we can finally play removal plus Haymaker. What Haymaker can he actually create out of this scenario? We're going to get to see. Running his ink, making sure that he has enough to do everything. So he's going to pay 5, deal with this 5 drop on the other side, and then at the same time, can he create Doctor? So now he has Doctor Facilier, and he's looking at the top 3. He's actually relatively stabilized with only a few activations from this Facilier away from winning the game, and both sides a little bit of a brick situation. From the side of the blue steel, he does not get to control what he top decks. So unlike these cauldrons where they give you the perfect card, you have to actually draw lethal in these situations, and it just has not been enough so far. But okay, and Bell, we see that incredibly powerful Bell being able to quest for 5. So actually, this card by itself will win the game if it gets to survive. And then we see, 2 lethal threats. Okay, so now a single removal will not be enough. Both of these cards say, I win the game on the spot if I get to untap with them. So this is it. This is the moment where Red Purple, did he anticipate these 2 lethal threats? Does he have the perfect answer in his hand? Something. And I think he found an answer again. What could it be? So many different options are not enough, but at the same time, very good amount of outs. Goes to 17. And then was that a be prepared yet again? Top taking these be prepares back to back. I mean, these cauldrons just giving him access to the perfect card each time is very exciting to see. And he looks at the top. Can he find something like a Haymaker that's also dealing with the board on the other side? Then Elsa would be the perfect card in the situation, presenting lethal while at the same time making sure that he doesn't lose. That would be an incredible top deck if he finds something like that on the following turn. And at the same time, just 2 lore away is the Sapphire Steel player. Incredibly good top deck war that we're witnessing right now. And I would have liked to see something like inking that hook, just giving yourself the greatest amount of outs in this particular scenario. He goes ahead and he does not have to reveal what he inks with Fishbones, as of course Fishbones can ink absolutely any card. And finding yet again 2 lethal threats, the 1 drop and the 2 drop representing lethal by themselves, and then of course Tinkerbell as well questing for 2. And there's that Elsa that we were talking about before. So Elsa, incredibly good out at this particular situation, presenting lethal at the same time stopping the opponent from winning. And is it going to happen? The miracle comeback from the side of the red purple player. It is considered by many people to be the best deck for a reason, and in this scenario it's definitely proving that it has some of the greatest late game possible. Incredibly good game on both players so far, and it's going to be a nail biter. If something like no removal comes through from the side of the red purple player, aside from this Elsa, he will actually let the ramp player go up to 19 lore. So he does need something else. The rabbit. So the clock is actually quite good in combination with something like an Aladdin that he finds. A drain effect in this scenario would be fantastic in dealing with the board and stopping lethal. So setting that up, we've seen the Ruby Amethyst player set up these sort of plays in the past. He's really good at looking forward to and anticipating what the opponent's going to do. So opts to keep it in hand just as a surprise and draws an extra card with the mirror instead. Now's the time for the ramp player to actually find something like a Let It Go or a Hades, and if he does not, such a crazy moment in the game. And he has one more redraw, and is it going to be enough? And oh my goodness, I don't know if he can actually get rid of this Elsa. No, it's just gonna be just barely. He's going up to 19. Did he do it? Did he actually complete the comeback? I can't believe it. Amazing. That was one of the most incredible games I've ever seen. That was epic. not being able to find that let it go or Hades at the end, and then showing off Elsa's power, being able to close out the game while at the same time dealing with what the opponent had going on. Incredible, just incredible late game prowess from the side of Ruby Amethyst. Just wonderful, wonderful game to see. And just a takeaway from that game, definitely Elsa, the highlight for Purple being able to put up lethal at the same time, showing removal, and the Cauldron. So Cauldron giving you that perfect look every single time, just finding those be prepares at the exact final scenario that needed to be found, and pleasure to watch that game. So shuffling up for the next one, and you would imagine that because of how the matchup works, every game takes a very relatively long time. Sapphire Steel, not a deck that can close out the game very quickly, and we saw in the early game he was hesitant to place a few of his questers on the table, just afraid of the be prepared until he basically knew or was sure that there was no be prepared, and then he started slamming threats on the table, and the be prepared was just top deck at the exact final card that it could be. So awesome to see, awesome stuff on both sides. And will there be enough time to, get a sneak win from the side of Steel Sapphire and, bring this game to a 1-1? Or was that comeback going to be the decider? I mean, that was incredible. I was anticipating, or I wanted to know if this tournament was actually going to be a best of one or a best of three going into it. It does seem like the official rules are best of three, which is awesome for us and all the viewers as they get to see as much Lorcana action as possible. So very glad that even though it's not a game with something like a sideboard, something like a sideboard is very advanced. The game is credited for its simplicity and great game design in the sense that it doesn't need like something like a mechanic like a sideboard, but you know, without that is still a best of three game. So definitely matchup knowledge overall is what's going to decide who wins games most of the time. Games that are best 2 out of 3 are wonderful in the sense that you get to really show off your skill and show off your knowledge of a particular matchup. So do enjoy that it is not just a best of one being seen here. So getting into the game, just mulliganing everything other than Beast Mirror. Beast Mirror just good in every scenario for the most part. So deciding to keep that one does the ramp player, and on the other side, just a full keep. So definitely likes what he sees. Presumably drawing something like a combination of good ink plus good removal, and not there is no Lilo from the side of the ramp player, so something like a Rafiki probably not necessary to be full mulligan into. So just keep something like Cauldron. Cauldron, we got to see why that card is so incredibly powerful. Being able to draw extra cards, increasing the quality of those extra cards is very important. So overall, an all-star on that last game, and we get to see an ink into Captain Hook. Captain Hook, the premier one-drop in these sort of control style decks, as it can deal with Simba quite efficiently. If Simba obviously being a 2-drop 2/3, Hook being able to go up to that 3 attack power mark, so that's why he is the preferred choice in decks such as this. But good to see Hook into Beast Mirror, so the perfect opening curve, and we're going to see if he can find that Fishbone Quill in order to get rid of some of these uninkables, drawing 2 uninkable Hades in the beginning, so not ideal if we don't see an option to be able to ink those away. And the blue steel deck, very powerful when it has all its options available to it, but is prone to bricking in certain scenarios. Third Hades, not what you want to see at all. You want to see as many inkables as possible, and just not being able to ink on that turn. Oh no. Something like a sideboard here would have been quite powerful, as definitely those smash the cannons would, or the cannon card would have definitely been taken out of the deck for games 2 and 3. Not incredibly powerful here, but actually considering all the possibilities that the red purple player has available to him, would the deal 2 card have been kept in the deck for that one drop Maleficent. Definitely a different style of red purple that we see here with some, a little bit of early game aggression available to it. So definitely a funny mini game there. Oh my god! In the fourth Hades, not what you want to see. Not what you want to see in this scenario. So in a commanding position and a game ahead is the Ruby Amethyst player. And after that first game, you know what? It's fine. We got to see an incredible game in game one. So it was stinker in game two, and that's just a consequence of, like I mentioned before, though, that prone to bricking style that the Steel Sapphire color gets to play because they get to play so many uninkables because of the Fishbone Quill. They get to lean on that card very heavily in order to ink every turn, but when you don't see that quill, it's incredibly difficult to get rid of these sort of uninkable hands, and just so many Hades being played. Very unfortunate, but is what it is. And now Aladdin gets to stop a little bit of the early game aggression, gets to check the Captain Hook, and do draw an inkable there. So one step closer to these Hades, and again, the Fire the Cannons can deal with this 2-2 on the other side of the table, and then continue the aggression with the Captain Hook. This Captain Hook already tapped 4 times, so definitely putting in the work, but again, with only one questing power, it is mostly there to be used as a removal spell, not really a questing threat. Does everything, but quite a balanced card in many scenarios, but right now, just not the aggressive threat that you want to see. But it does give you, a little bit of chip damage. So moving back to the Ursula's Cauldron, I do imagine that he wants to find just more inkable cards, placing at the bottom anything that he might not need for the matchup. Just if you don't need any particular card, or you see some sort of card that's good in one matchup but not good in the other, Cauldron is also good in those scenarios where you get to bottom deck the card that's bad and keep the card that is good. And oh my goodness, completely uninkable card. So now actually the ramp player does have the ability to draw an inkable card on the following turn, play it down, and then reset his hand. You would presume that he wants to do that based on the 4 Hades, but then he won't have Hades in these prolonged game scenarios. So just an overall unfortunate draw from his side overall. But it does seem like the red purple player just firing on all cylinders. I mean, this was a game where he got to see Cauldron in the early game, and it's just helped him every single draw from this game. So you have to believe that his hand is near perfect at this point. Then Maui being able to rush into basically almost every single card in the Sapphire Steel colors other than something like Tamatoa, and then after it's done its removal spell duties, it can go ahead and be inked, as we see here, but also sing for the friends on the other side. So just an overall incredibly versatile card. The red-purple strategy just showing it has a lot of versatility in many different situations, and while it's ahead, definitely one of those situations that the deck wants to be in, as does any deck, right? So passing it back, does he get to draw? So interestingly enough, so he did have a choice. So he gets to play the Quill, being able to play one of his uninkables, and he decides to, instead of inking the Quill and going for the reset hand, he goes for a little bit of a slower game plan, understands that the game is not going to end anytime soon, so wants to give himself the highest amount of ink before going to reset both players' hands. And I do agree with this choice. Just Fishbone Quill, probably the best top deck that he could have had in that scenario. Just making all of his Hades in hand now a little bit more live. So great cards in order to be able to mount a comeback. And again, like we mentioned before, he's not in any sort of duress. Red purple deck not known to end the game very quickly. Oh, and here is the Maleficent that we saw in game one. That Maleficent actually instrumental in making the red purple player move a little bit closer to victory in the early game. Then it got board wiped by the Grab Your Swords, but because of that lead that he was able to establish, is different Ursula and Elsa threats in the late game were just barely able to get him over the line. So good to see that he has yet again plays Maleficent here. Goes ahead and inks the second Fishbone Quill, so he's determined that he can't keep going that slow in the matchup as he sees that Maleficent questing for two. And oh, two Be Prepared's hit along with the Elsa. So just taking care of a lot of haymakers, but does he have enough time? Again, he doesn't have Hades, like we mentioned before, and he hasn't solidified something that can sink for 5. So that this grab your sword is going to have to wait an entire turn cycle, and he gets to see this Maleficence just go to town questing for 3. So just has to deal with it for now. But he has broken out of this uninkable phase of the game that he was struggling with before, and he does have that Beast Mirror plus Quill combo that he was able to establish in game 1. So definitely not looking as bad as it was a couple of turns ago. Oh my goodness, Ursula just making sure that the ramp player stays as close to 0 questing as possible. Goes ahead and steals one and draws a card. Just Ursula, an incredibly powerful card, and we got to see that every single nickel and dime value that the red purple player was able to extract on the last game mattered. Obviously, the ramp player getting upwards of 19 lore, but could not close out the game, not be able to get that 20th lore. So every little bit of value matters, in that Ursula instrumental in those sort of value grind games. So good to see that down on the table now. And how does the blue steel player navigate being behind? We did get to see him ahead for a few turns during the mid game on the previous game, but how does he work his way out of being at a deficit in this particular scenario? Well, definitely something like grab your swords is the first step to any sort of a comeback, but does he want to play it now, or does he want to wait until he has something that can sing it for later? And does he even have a vehicle to sing it with? It does seem like Tamato is a little too expensive for this turn, and he might not be able to wait that far, so I just have to deal with this Maleficent 1-drop. Being able to quest for 2 has been incredibly powerful over the course of these few turns, and this card that not all red-purple decks actually play in their 60 something configurations, it's just been really really good so far. So I like this sort of Lilo impression that the Maleficent is making for this red purple variant that we're seeing here. So I very much enjoying the innovation. And then Tinkerbell just to threaten the possibility of shitting into the larger Tinkerbell at a later point in time. He's going to need that sort of like threatening the removal aspect from this Tinkerbell, because at this point in time has to deal with both Ursula and Maui being able to do something like Tinkerbelling shift on top of the smaller Tinkerbell, and then attacking the Ursula, and then finishing off the Maui would be a great sequence. Oh, but we do see Facile actually going to stunt that development, and if we remember correctly, all 4 Hades are gone, so something like dealing with this Facile wall behind is not able to be done. So it's going to be a combination of something like a let it go into removing the field, but does he have enough ink? It's just a consequence of the stunted early game. He might not have enough time to deal with both Facile and Ursula, and both of those threats also having 3 questing power, so wasn't under a lot of duress while he was breaking out of his sort of uninkable sluggish opening. But at this point there is 6 questing threat on the other side, so now he actually has to deal with the board in some form. And Bell, not exactly what you want to see in this sort of deficit situation. He does, if he chooses to, get to deal with one of these cauldrons. I mean, cauldrons aren't even being activated at this point, but just theoretically get rid of one. So what exactly is this little Tink going to do? I mean, leaving it untapped and using it for a shift later down the line seems to be one of the best ways to use it. Alternatively, he can actually go ahead and draw an additional card and give himself as many options as possible. It's just a very difficult scenario, but definitely drawing an extra card seems decent here. No, so he does leave it open to being shifted onto in the future, but 6 lore going to be gained this turn. and Maui standing strong, being able to answer any card that threatens the field on the way back. So it's in a commanding position. And we saw the red purple player win from it, and that is time in the round actually. And because he won the first game, he actually is declared the victor of the match. Like we mentioned, just clutching it out in game one assures that he went ahead and won in time in game two. So all around, well deserved from the side of the red purple player. And yeah, that was basically two of the sort of bigger control decks of the format just battling it out over there, and red purple in the end standing strong, just showing that it can come back, having such versatile cards coming back from every scenario. And the highlight cards, the Cauldron